In this video, I'm gonna make cassoulet. My goal is to cook something using a streamlined process and off-the-shelf ingredients whenever possible. It's time to offend the entirety of France. Probably. Cassoulet is one of those historical and traditional dishes for which every single family has their own version, and they consider everyone else's version to be pure heresy. I'm going to do even worse, because I've never traveled to the birthplace of cassoulet, and I've never had it in a French restaurant within the country of France. The dish's birthplace is shared by three French towns: Toulouse, Castelnaudary, and Carcassonne. Despite the towns being literally an hour's drive from each other, they still managed to come up with different versions to call their own and then induce a rivalry that would make a hockey team blush. For my part, I did do research, and I made many attempts, and I have arrived at a home version that I personally enjoy. It's worth noting that the recipe can change drastically depending on who makes it. The ingredients tend to remain similar for the broad strokes, but the preparation goes into so many different directions that it's hard to figure out which one is correct. Chances are, most of the methods are correct and incorrect at the same time. What I want to offer is a guideline mainly for North Americans, and not a set of hard and fast rules to follow to the letter. I will expand on this as I go along, but for now, here is what I will be using for this one. White beans. The proper French recipe calls for a bean type known as Tarbais or Lingot. These are quite simply not a thing in my neck of the woods. I could probably get a jar of these in a specialty store for the cost of an internal organ, but I want to try and keep it surface level. White kidney beans will be my bean of choice. You might find them under the name cannellini as well. Half a pound will be good enough, and that equates to roughly a cup and a third of dry beans. I would not recommend using canned beans for this. That dish is going to cook for literally hours, and using dry beans will allow them to withstand the treatment much better. Baking soda. Optional, but highly recommended. It will give the beans a softer texture. Meat. Freestyle category here. Get what you can find. For my part, I obtained 4 ounces of sliced bacon. I have a pair of Toulouse sausages, which are basically pork with garlic and spices. I have some random scraps of pork belly I had lying around. Lastly, I have a pair of duck leg confits, fully cooked and ready for use, which happen to sell for not so expensive around here. What you find will be different. Think local, think peasant. If it's deer season, now is a good time to find some. Pork belly is oftentimes a popular choice. Chicken is frowned upon by the French, but it can work for your first practice run without breaking the bank. If you cooked some roasts or whatever the few days before, throw them in here. Look for meat that will stand up for itself in the dish, but not so much as to steal the show. A variety of mostly affordable stuff is what we are shooting for, generally pork and poultry. Cassoulet is meant to be an everyman's dish, so refrain from going too crazy. 1 onion. Look for the smallest one in your bag and it will be good enough for the job. Garlic cloves. 4 or 5 should do the trick. Spices, consisting of 3 whole cloves and 1 bay leaf. Fine herbs. I will be looking at about 2 tablespoons of dried parsley and a couple pinches of Herbes de Provence. The latter is really a mix. If you want to make some, go for 2 parts by weight each of thyme, rosemary, savory, and oregano, and 1 part each of basil and shredded bay leaf. If you are not in the mood to entertain that, then a pinch of whichever ingredients you got will work out just fine. Nobody's looking. You could also do like the French and make a bouquet garni of fresh herbs. My personal situation makes using fresh herbs difficult and wasteful, so I will be using the dried ones. Chicken and vegetable stock. It's possible to get away with using better than bouillon, and you might want to go for that on your first run to make things easier. If so, make 2 cups and no more. Still, if you can do homemade stock, then your taste buds will thank you, and it should be part of your gold standard. Myself, I will be going for the homemade stock. Since I don't happen to have any right now, I will make some the day before and technically stagger the cassoulet's preparation over 2 days. Vegetables. Depending on how you make your stock, you may or may not need those. If you are going for the homemade stock, then yes, definitely carrots and celery at the very least. If you are going for the instant stock, you can probably get away with using a little bit of instant vegetable stock to mix into the chicken one. Lastly, a piece of pork rind. Optional, but recommended. I got this one off a slab of pork belly I purchased at a Chinese grocery store. I wouldn't be surprised if you could get this at the local butcher shop. But hey, if you can't find any, that's not a big deal. Its purpose is to supply collagen into the dish and make it feel smoother and more velvety. Now, if you will excuse me for a moment, I am going to make some chicken stock. I had a freezer bag full of bones just begging to be used, so now is a good time as any. These bones I will put in the oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for an hour and give them a stir every 20 minutes or so. That will further help with the flavor. Feel free to skip the roasting if you are not in the mood for it. Now that the chicken is roasted, I can check and see if I can salvage anything from these bones. Turns out there was enough for a lunch in there. Very nice. For bonus points, I'll break up the bones so they can release the marrow they got inside whenever possible. Completely optional. Anyway, now to get some water in there and get it hot. While the water is getting to temperature, I can ready up some vegetables to add into the stock for flavor. I think I'll put a celery in there. Don't mind me chopping up some extra, I'm gonna steam my weekday veggies while I'm at it. Kill two birds with one stone. Same deal for the carrots. Weekday veg and the peelings can go into the stock. I have a leek that's set in the freezer and it is probably medium well done by now. I can easily sacrifice it to the stock. Parsley is a questionable choice for weekday veg, but it would have gone to waste otherwise, so in it goes, and the stems can go into the stock. In retrospect, I went a little too heavy on the vegetables in my stock, but that's part of just happy little accidents. Once I get the water boiling, I will leave this on full blast for 30 minutes. I will then let cool and put it in the fridge overnight. The veggies I was boiling and steaming in the sieve, I will take out whenever they are ready. Those are not part of the cassoulet recipe. Pretend they never existed. Day 2. My first order of business is to soak the beans. A cup and a third in volume, that means just shy of 4 cups of water, and a teaspoon and some change of baking soda. Get that to boil for 5 minutes, then take off the heat and let sit for an hour before throwing the water out. While the beans are sitting pretty, I can get to removing the layer of fat on top of my stock. I don't need to be too demanding here, just gotta get the easy pickings out and that'll be fine. I can then reheat the stock so it goes liquid again and I can take the solids out. Since I broke up the bones yesterday, I will also pass the entire stock into a fine mesh sieve to make sure I don't have any bone shards. Once the stock is nice and hot, I'll set it aside and keep it warm. I will reiterate that I went full deluxe on the stock. Your own preparation may not be as involved. This is a 12-inch cast iron skillet. It will be my main cooking vessel today. I do not have the traditional cassoulet used to make the dish, but I trust that the skillet will have plenty enough exposed surface area to achieve a similar effect. Since I'm making 4 portions, I can afford to use the skillet. If I were to make more, I would shift the recipe to my giant cast iron cooking pot instead. It's worth noting that the amount of effort in cassoulet remains the same no matter how many portions you make, so if you got a big party to entertain, now you know what to do. I made some bacon and eggs earlier, and I didn't bother cleaning the pan since I knew I'd be using it again right after eating lunch. I can just use the bacon fat that melted earlier, and I'm off to the races. Use whichever cooking fat you got on hand. Anything goes. This is the part where I seriously take a hard left against normality. The most common way of making the dish is to simmer the beans with a few aromatics until they are almost but not quite done, throw out the aromatics and the cooking water, and meanwhile sear some meat in a separate pan before putting everything together for the next phase. In my case, I'm trying to do the most of the recipe as I can in the skillet, one pot style. Nothing stops you from using however many pots and pans you want though. I feel that the way I'm doing it makes the beans more flavorful, but I will readily admit that I have no scientific basis to back that up. My method works for myself and it makes my own life easier, that much I will say. I'll be getting the pan hot, and I'll brown any raw meat I've got. I want to get everything nice and golden with some sweet, sweet Maillarderie action. The duck legs are already cooked, so they can go in the fridge until it's their turn. Likewise, once I've seared the meats, they can go in the fridge until it's their turn to come back for the final assembly. Again, you could do that in a separate pan, closer to the moment of the final assembly. That looks about right for the bacon and pork belly. The sausages, I'll give them another few minutes. Once that's done, I'll drain all but 2 or 3 tablespoons of fat. Grease is good, but there is a limit to everything. Once again, drain the fat now. Do not, I repeat, do not do this. Whoops. Now I have to fish out however much I can while the onions are cooking. Well done. Anyway, my next step is to soften the onion. Get some color on them, and meanwhile I can ready the garlic and the pork rind. You could eat the pork rind if you really wanted to. Allegedly, some cassoulet recipes get the rinds cooking for a while, and once they are soft, chopped up however finely you like and incorporated into the final dish. I will not do that, as I am not fond of the texture of pork rind. I'll cut the rind into pieces with a pair of kitchen shears and work them in so they sit on the bottom of the pan. This way they will be completely submerged. They will contribute their velvety texture, and then I will discard them while serving. Now to add the beans I had soaked earlier, followed by my stock. I will be adding enough to cover everything here. Note that my homemade stock is completely unseasoned, because I have no way to tell how much of it will ultimately make it into the final dish. If you're using instant stock, use the 2 cups you put together, and then from this point on, use only water. Adding more instant stock would turn the dish into a salt bomb in no time at all. If you are in doubt, make your stock too weak. In go the other ingredients: garlic, finely minced or crushed, followed by 2 tablespoons of dried parsley, a couple pinches of Herbes de Provence, or whatever else feels nice in the moment, and the cloves and bay leaves. You could wrap them up into a tea bag or a cheesecloth for easy retrieval later, but I chose to live dangerously. Right away, it smells as if I put way too much parsley in there. Not to worry, this will taper down as the dish cooks. I'll bring all that to a gentle simmer, cover, and then cook until the beans are tender but still put up some resistance. 45 minutes should do the trick for white kidney beans. For those using a bouquet garni, now's your cue to put it in. After 45 minutes, my beans are in good shape. I can remove the cloves and the bay leaf whenever I spot them, or leave them in and just not care. Time to proceed with the final assembly proper. Arrange the meat so everybody can have a piece of each thing. I'm shooting for 4 portions, so I will split my sausages and my duck legs in 2. Push those meats in there, nice and deep, but do let them peek out just a little. In my case, I'll need a good dash of pepper since I didn't season my stock earlier. Seasoning only at this point, onto the final assembly, will ensure that I don't overshoot. In my hair case, I need to remain conservative, since the duck confit contains a lot of salt, and that will seep into the dish as it cooks. Another option at your disposal is to sit the duck legs on top of the cassoulet instead of pushing them into it. If going that route, then you'll want to put the duck legs only during the last 30 minutes of your oven baking, as otherwise they will become dry. Now to preheat the oven to 300 degrees Fahrenheit. The dish will spend anywhere from 2 to 3 hours in there. In my case, I am going for 3, as I feel it makes the cassoulet creamier in texture. As the dish cooks in there, I will check up on it every 30 minutes or so, just to make sure it's well behaved, taste for seasoning now and then, and have a glance at the texture of the beans. A golden film will appear on top of the dish, which I can lightly break up and submerge with a spoon or a spatula. That film is what the French call the crust. Counterintuitively, it's not very much a crust at all, or rather, it's a very thin one. I will also take the opportunity to refill the skillet as necessary so that the stock is mostly level with the meat and the beans. It's worth noting that oftentimes there is less stock in the dish than you might suspect. All the thick bubbles make the levels seem higher than it really is. You are going to have to eyeball that one and play it according to your preference. It's worth noting that some people, including some French people, like to spread breadcrumbs on top for additional crispiness. I choose not to do that. There we go. Things are looking beautiful indeed. When I serve, I will be careful not to include the pork rinds from earlier. These have done their job and they can be discarded. The end result is one of the best things to happen on a cold winter night. It's hearty, it's tasty, and it's packed oh so full of flavor. Did I do it wrong? Probably, in some aspects at the very least. Dishes of that sort are always done wrong according to somebody somewhere. It's kind of unavoidable when making a dish far away from its place of origin. Got to make do with what you got, and do your best to keep in the spirit with an honest effort from the heart. I take a bite of this, all my worries of wrongness go away. It tastes incredible to me, and I feel it was worth all the effort. Bon appétit!